Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ambassador Lighthizer, for joining us today. You know, as the representative of the air capital of the world and the breadbasket of America, trade's a critical issue for my district and for the state of Kansas. In fact, according to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, trade supports over 108,000 jobs for these exports, and the value over $17 billion for the economy in our state. Before I focus on trade relationships with China, I want to first thank you for your work on upgrading NAFTA and replacing it with the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Free Trade Agreement. You know, Canada and Mexico are Kansas' top export markets, worth about $3.5 billion. And since its adoption, NAFTA has been really beneficial for my district, particularly the farmers, ranchers, and aerospace manufacturers. But the 20-year-old agreement did need some upgrading and some reform efforts, and I'm thankful for that they've done that, and hopefully that we can get through this process and get that ratified quickly so that we can move forward with some of the other important issues that you're doing. So let's go back today and focus, as we want to, on China. You know, tariff retaliation from China has threatened Kansas exports worth about $525 million to China, led by a lot of grain products, soybeans, sorghum, cotton, beef, as well as aircraft manufacturing and other manufacturing. As a big supporter of free and fair trade, I believe a prolonged trade war with these tariffs is not the final outcome that any of us want. You know, as I've talked to Kansas farmers and manufacturers in the district, I've heard over and over again how they support the president and believe we can get a better trade deal negotiating through strength. One of the things I think our colleagues on both sides of the aisle would agree that China has been harming American businesses and workers for decades. In fact, we've seen so much cheating over the years that it's having a drastic impact. You know, for example, in 2013, a Chinese national was arrested in Kansas for attempting to steal some intellectual property regarding research pertaining to rice seeds and to send that to scientists in China. So I'm proud that President Trump's been one of the first presidents to stand up to these unfair trade practices and hope to bring China to the table in a meaningful way to help make sure we have free and fair trade agreements. Since we've entered into negotiations with China, there's been a lot of positive steps, and we want to make sure that we continue moving forward with some of those positive activities. I don't want to stop there. You know, as I mentioned earlier, that China's threatened exports from Kansas worth $525 million. And one of the things we want to make sure that, you know, as I talk with constituents, that particularly with both in the farming community as well as aerospace, and hopefully that we can work on making sure that the retaliatory and regulatory practices are fixed. And so I just want to talk a little bit about what you're seeing in that regards on your negotiation of correcting those unfair practices.
Well, you know, thank you very much, Congressman, and thank you specifically for your support on USMCA. As you know, that's our top priority, and if the Congress doesn't see fit to pass that, then everything else we're talking about is kind of like a footnote, because it'll mean we can't do trade deals and we're not going to be in the trade space. I mean, it would be such an admission of failure by all of us. So I'm very grateful for your support in that area. I would also note that we talk about manufacturing jobs being lost because of Chinese practices. The reality is that farmers have been hurt as much as anyone by their practices. That's a huge market. They're a second or third biggest agricultural market if you skip over 18 and go back to 17 and traditional years. But the reality is they should be buying much more agricultural products. And my hope is that these purchases, as part of this, while not central, will lead to that. Will lead to new markets that will go on for years and years and years.
All right. Thank you, Ambassador. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.